When it comes to conscious manifestation, my interest at this point is not in manifesting anything for myself personally, but in wanting to help manifest a world that is more peaceful and just for everyone. Can how you teach conscious manifestation help with that? Good question. Relevant. Manifesting a world that is more just, I think that was the word, more peaceful and just for everyone. Well, that would be it's a good aim. Now, ultimately, of course, what you experience as the world is intrinsically one with your consciousness. The only place where you experience the world is in your consciousness. Philosophers have even questioned whether there actually is a world out there independent of conscious perception. We don't need to go there, but there's no doubt that the entire world happens inside you, one could say. You don't know what you see, what the eyes transmit, the senses transmit becomes nerve impulses that are sent to the brain, and that's just on the physical level. And then these nerve impulses are decoded, and then some kind of word appears within you. But to what extent that corresponds to a world out there, we don't even know. So to change the world, so you look at the world in some way, you could almost say, go as far as to say, what you're actually looking at is a reflection in the external, in the world of form, of your state of consciousness, I could say. It's an interesting way to look at it. And the state of consciousness is partly there is your personal world and there is the collective world. So the two, they are connected, but they're not the same, because first of all, there is what you experience as a world in your personal life, or the people you habitually interact with, where you live, your surroundings. It starts with simple things like even the objects that surround you habitually, where you live. So your world is your personal, your relationships with humans that you live with, your relationships with other humans that you meet every day casually, where you work, the people you work with. So all these things, your personal life, so-called life, is one sphere that you move in. And the important thing is not to neglect that in search of a better collective world. The two are related, but to disregard, this is a mistake that is often made, to disregard your personal sphere, the world that is immediately accessible to you as you and your life, the people in your life, where you live, all that, your work. To neglect that, it's very seductive to think there's so much wrong with the world out there, the collective. That's really what I should be concerned with, because there's so much wrong out there. You can see it. You just have to turn on some kind of device, whether it's television or that brings you the news and the commentaries, continuous stream. And then, Of course, that is the collective world that then enters your living room or wherever you are, and then they get mixed up. They can obliterate, the collective can obliterate your personal life, and you think your personal life is quite irrelevant now, because what really matters, the world needs to change. It's so dreadful. Well, yes, the world needs to change, and the world is changing because humanity is a work in progress. Humanity is slowly evolving, fits and starts and regressive periods. It takes a few steps forward and then a few steps, 4 steps forward, 3 steps back, then a few more forward. There's a gradual evolution of humanity, and to focus only on what is going wrong within that process, that evolutionary process, is also very misleading, because that's what you see when you watch the media and so on. It focuses not on what's going right or what has gone right, it focuses on what's going wrong. Then you give that more and more attention. By giving attention to something, you amplify it. So whatever you give it, now I'm not saying to completely ignore the world, no, but to give it an excessive amount of attention and only continuously think about what's wrong with the world, then you forget what's right with the world, and that then diminishes. So we have the external world coming into your living room, for example, through the media. And it can be, as I said, you can sometimes believe that your personal world, your immediate sphere of influence is irrelevant, but that's not the case. So the starting point with changing the world is to become aware of how you operate in this world. The starting point is, how do you relate to the humans in your life? How do you, what is your mind? What is your mind doing? What is your predominant state of consciousness? What are your predominant emotions? What are the predominant thoughts that go through your mind? It's vitally important to become aware of that. If you're not aware of what the predominant emotions are, that the predominant thoughts are, plus accompanying emotions that go through your mind, you are unaware. And the emotions, the thoughts and emotions that arise continuously within you are a form of conditioning, and so they take possession of you. So it's vitally important, as the starting point for changing the world is to become aware of your world. So part of this is, of course, to give more attention to the present moment, because the more you think, the more future you generate. And the more attention you give to the present moment, the less thinking. Because to be really present, you don't think about it, you just are with it, give it attention. I recommend the little things of life to be more attentive to all the little things that make up every hour of every day, every minute, every hour, and give them more attention. Walking steps, one step at a time. Objects that you're handling, all the time you're handling objects in your life. You're always touching something, putting something here and there. is everything that you handle just a means to an end, or are you able to just appreciate the simple presence or even of a so-called inanimate object? Contemplation also of all the lovely things that make up your environment, part of your environment. For example, if I were sitting here alone, let's say I'm waiting for everybody to arrive, I might be sitting here looking, of course, at the flower, sense the stillness, and then there's a glass table here, and then there's a glass of water here, and there's a clock and a bell and tissues, and they all reflect the light in different ways. There's a little bit of a rainbow effect in the glass of water here, and then the lights are reflected on the bells, almost like a mirror, and there's the clock ticking away. It's a beautiful scene. Sometimes you go to an art gallery, well, not so much with modern art, but a very favorite thing would be still life artists. And it took a while in art before they discovered the artists in the history of art, before they discovered the seemingly insignificant things and started to give attention to those. Before that happened, they were very much interested in the huge things, the saints or the kings or the huge battle scenes or the big, they painted those things, or the important people, or some dramatic thing, volcanic eruption or whatever, a fire. And then at some point they started to discover the beauty and the incredible sense of the quality that is in the little things. They started painting, for example, simple people. The Dutch artists, perhaps I'm not that knowledgeable about artists, but the famous Dutch paintings show it's not so much big, important people. They show simple people, a woman in the kitchen baking bread, simple people sitting around the table eating a very simple meal, and there's the light, incredible light effects light comes through the window, and there's an incredible sense of presence and aliveness in the painting. And this is a scene that in normal life you would never have, unless you're really very conscious. Nobody would have stopped and said, "Oh, isn't that amazing? These people are sitting around a table eating a simple meal, and there's light coming through the window." Nobody would have done that. Perhaps after these artists depicted relatively seemingly insignificant things, perhaps it motivated some people to give more attention to that. But even now, it's still, people very much overlook that, and you overlook then a large part of your life. You don't give it attention. When I say give attention, there's an element of appreciation of everything, of the little things. And you begin to realize that your entire life consists mainly of little things. Even if you're a VIP, it still consists mainly, you're always sitting somewhere, standing somewhere, looking around, handling things, going from here to there, either on a bus or your private jet. And this giving attention, that is sometimes called gratitude. That's kind of part of it, this appreciation. But I don't necessarily use the word gratitude too often, because it implies that you say to somebody, "Oh, thank you." But there's a simple appreciation of the isness of things, of their presence. So you no longer regard almost continuously your entire environment as a means to an end. And what's the end? You need to get to some future moment where suddenly everything is going to be better than now. And so you're always on your way. It's a stepping stone to the next moment, and every object that you handle has only utilitarian value, but has no value in itself, is never appreciated for its beingness. And then you do the same to human beings. They're only regarded, what can they do for me now? How do they fit into my schemes, into my plans? Because there's a future orientation continuously, which is the mind, because there is no future. It's created by the mind. It becomes extremely enjoyable to be contemplating the little things that surround you. Then there is something, yes, there is an element of gratitude that comes with it. This appreciation is an element of you appreciate the sense-perceived world. This is an aspect of reality. It's not the deepest aspect of reality, but it is the surface of the ocean, and it's beautiful. And that also means it's not just when you are quietly contemplating, it's also when you're going from A to B to perform some action, you're going to buy something, going to the whatever it is, post office. Appreciate the journey and every step of the journey and look around so that the 10 minutes of going to the shop or driving to the shop or taking your bicycle to the shop isn't completely wasted and reduced to means to an end. And you can actually, that every moment is significant. And ultimately, it's only ever the one moment. And then this waiting game comes to an end, waiting for the big break. That's an expression. I don't know what breaks, but waiting for whatever it is. Of course, you have a goal. You may have a goal in life, and you're moving towards it. But in the meantime, this is now, and you know you're moving towards it. It becomes very enjoyable to be wherever you are when you have this ability to contemplate the little things, both when you're passively contemplating or even when you are moving, in being engaged with things. Meditation is really all about becoming still, without going to sleep. Well, let me correct what I just said. It's not so much becoming still, but being still. Becoming would imply that you have to go somewhere or do something. Being is already here and now. And in a sane life, a conscious life, a harmonious life, there needs to be a balance between becoming and being. Becoming is doing things, getting things done, and so on in this world, dealing with things, creating things, achieving things. And being is about being aware of the present moment. Which, after all, is all you ever have. Whatever you achieve through becoming in the future eventually turns into the present moment. So as I speak to you, the meditation, if we even want to call it that, it's perhaps best to forget about the word. As I speak, be aware of the silence or the stillness between the words. Being aware means just notice that it's there. It's very simple. So you notice that in addition to the words, there's another dimension that is easily overlooked, and that's the dimension of stillness, which we could also call space or spaciousness. So when you notice that there are two, so to speak, two dimensions here, the dimension of words, which you hear and which then become thoughts in your head, and the dimension of no thing, spaciousness. And you just notice, that's all that's required, that there is that dimension also present, so you notice it in between words and even behind the words, so to speak. Now when you notice it, what happens inside you? What does it mean to notice the stillness? be aware of the stillness. It means you have become still inside. It means you're conscious, but at this moment, you're not thinking. But you're alert, present, completely here, but not thinking. So, that's the realization of the dimension of depth within you. And without that realization, your entire life is a surface phenomenon. You run around on the surface of being, never satisfied for long, frustrated, almost always feeling there's something important missing in your life. And of course there is. But you can't find it on the surface of your life. The horizontal dimension, looking here and there. You have to not become still, but realize that that dimension of stillness is already in you. And another word to describe it is to say it's this alert presence that you can sense right now. And you may find the mind wanting to come in from time to time and say something about it, or even deny it, or say, I don't understand it, or say, what's the point? I have other problems to worry about. I'll become still when I have solved all the other problems. But why many people, most people experience their life as a succession of problems and ultimately a frustrating experience is because they haven't discovered that dimension, the most vital thing or no thing to discover within yourself. That stillness is also power. It's the source not only of yourself, it is the source of life. And nothing creative can ever come into your life if you're not connected with that. Whenever you feel joy, for a moment perhaps, in your daily life, or a moment of loving interaction with another human being or an animal, or when you suddenly see beauty somewhere and you go, oh, now without you necessarily being aware of it, there has arisen a moment of stillness in you, if only 3 seconds, or perhaps a bit more. And it's only there that the joy of life arises, or the ability to really connect with another human being. Without it, without the stillness, you have only your conceptual mind. Thinking, 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 and you relate to the world through the conceptual mind, judging, thinking, judging, interpreting continuously. The inner self-talk, the monologue, which may become a dialogue in your head. You're no good, says one voice. The other one says, "But I'm trying. Whatever the voice in your head is doing, and then you try to relate to another human being through that. And before long, concepts come in, judgments come in. So there's always a sense of insufficiency, of lack, of not enough. There's always conflict arising when the dimension of stillness is not at all operating in your life. Or very briefly, it's not enough. Yes, it's good if you can occasionally experience joy and a sense of aliveness and see beauty and a loving feeling towards another human being, not the egoic love, but flowing, a goodwill flowing out towards another human being. Yes, it's wonderful, but if it's only brief moments, then yes, at least that keeps you going. But it could be much deeper. It could operate in your life continuously so that you never lose touch with it. But the first step is realizing it's there always. It's already there. It's already here. I wrote in the little book called Stillness Speaks, I said, you are never more truly yourself than when you are still. And you might think that's a strange statement. Most people, when they talk about myself, talk about their personal history and their personal problems and their life situation. When they talk about myself, that's what they refer to. They refer to my relationships, my work situation, my financial situation, my home situation, my health. Me and my life. And of course, all that that is the case. But is that who you really are?
Hi. Hi. The hardest word that I'm having trouble with right now is responsibility. And I have a hunch that most of the things that I consider responsibility are just my ego telling me things I have to do. But I also, when I think about the future of the earth and human evolution and stuff like that, sometimes I have big emotions of responsibility. So I'm just curious.
Thank you.
About the right relationship to the word responsibility.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, it's a strange word. It has been pointed out that if you look at the word, it seems to be talking about the ability to respond. So
to take responsibility for, what is it that you can take responsibility for primarily? It's taking responsibility for your state of consciousness, which determines what kind of world you create. Because you are humanity. Humanity is an abstract concept, doesn't exist. Humanity is the human being. You are humanity. So for humanity to take responsibility, you need to take primarily responsibility for your state of consciousness, because only a diseased or dysfunctional state of consciousness produces a diseased and dysfunctional world out there. By world, I mean the human-made world that has been imposed on what's already there, the planet, which is potentially, of course, a paradise. The planet, pristine, unbelievable jewel, a being of great intelligence. We are not separate from it, but the being is going through a transitional process, and every transitional process is critical. It may or may not work, in which case the being will go some other way. But your state of consciousness determines what kind of world you create, what kind of action you take, and what consequences your actions have. So here, this is why my main work is to address the cause of dysfunction, which lies in the human mind. The dysfunction of the human mind, or as it is sometimes called in Zen, the sickness of the human mind. So, as I see it, and I don't think anybody who reads history can doubt it, there is a deep-seated dysfunction in humans, has been there for thousands of years. And if there's no shift in that, then the dysfunction will destroy us. It probably won't destroy the planet, because the planet has enormous resources, but it'll take a while for the planet to recover. All you have to do then is primarily take responsibility for your state of consciousness now. Now. And this is what the entire teaching really is about. What is my state of consciousness at this moment? Am I generating disturbance? Am I generating negativity? Am I generating conflict and suffering for myself and others? Am I generating inner pollution? Am I polluting the beautiful being that I am with continuous absurd movements of thought, producing negative emotions, producing an entire entity that is illusory, that I call the me. So to take responsibility, there needs to be just, of course, an awakening where you can say, okay, I will take responsibility now. Some people don't know that there is even the possibility of taking responsibility. That's why you are so important. Anybody who realizes it, you are the beginning of the transformed world. I don't know who first coined the famous phrase. You hear it quite often these days. You need to be the change. That the change that you want to see out there, you need to embody that. And that's not primarily what you do. There's something more primary than what you do. It's who you are. Who you are is your state of consciousness. Whatever you do flows out of that. So that's the primary is that. So the change is the transformed state of consciousness. Now, that is your responsibility. Once you've seen that, that's your responsibility. Now you know it. People who are not yet at that level don't realize it, and that's fine. You can't expect the whole world already to be at that stage. It's enough for you to take responsibility, knowing there's still a few million others who don't know that they can take responsibility because they live in such unconsciousness that they see the entire evil in others. What they see as evil, it's all in them. And they make half the world into their enemy. It's all out there. They still, that's fine. Your response, it's only those are required to take responsibility who are up to it. But even those who are totally unconscious still, on the one hand, they don't know what they're doing. Obviously, as Jesus said on the cross, they know not what they do. In other words, they are in the grip of unconscious forces, or unconscious mental emotional streams. They don't know what they do. They cannot be held responsible. And people say, well, they should be held responsible. No, they can't, but they don't know what they do. However, the fact that they are not responsible because they can't be responsible does not mean that they do not suffer the consequences of their unconsciousness. So they generate suffering. And eventually, suffering is the fire in which the ego gets burned up, the collective ego and the personal ego. That's the long way, the slow way, the painful way. And then there is a shortcut, which is any spiritual teaching it cuts through that. The painful way, the long way of waking up. More and more suffering. The planet might not endure such a long learning process for humanity. So if the learning process of humanity does not become shortened, it is doubtful that the planet can allow the humanity to learn through further suffering for another 500 years, or even 200 years, or even 100 years. So that's, you're responsible for all that. Thank you.
Pure awareness, in your pure awareness, conceptually, of course, you don't know anything. When your mind stops, for example, now, if I stop speaking now, and you're still here too, we can do it together. I stop speaking for a few seconds, and as I stop speaking, do you need to fill that space between me stopping to speak and starting to speak again? Do you need to fill that space with thought, or are you able to simply be present in that space? In other words, are you able to just simply be, don't suppress thought, that doesn't work. You can't hold your breath and say, I must not think. That might work, but then thinking will come up even more strongly once you start breathing again. So it's not that. You can't hold down thought. It's a pure shift into a more alert state of consciousness. Alert. Alert means, okay, now acting out alertness. Now, I'm not just acting it out. When I look at you in this weird way, I'm not thinking. And when you look at me, looking at you in this weird way, you also could experiment with that and see whether, as I stop speaking now for 10 seconds, you can just be in that space of pure awareness where you take in sense perceptions against the background of awareness. And you might notice that in that space, you don't know anything. You don't even know your name, because your name is a thought. You don't know anything in that space. And yet, you are there, conscious, present, without any movement in the mind. That's presence. That was Socrates' state when he said, I know that I don't know anything, because in that state you know that you don't know anything, and there are no words in it. Now don't confuse that, which is a state of rising above thinking. Don't confuse that with falling below thinking, which can be nice too. If you are tortured on a daily and nightly basis by your mind, to fall below thinking can be a relief. But that's not why we're here. Otherwise, I would be offering you all kinds of substances to help you fall below thinking. You can drink and smoke and go, feels so good. Don't have to think anymore. Oh, a bit more of that and a bit more of that. So that's where eventually that takes you. That's a relief. You can experience the same relief when you get tired at night. There's a moment when you're still conscious, but when you're too tired to think about your problems. So you're not being tortured by your mind, as it usually tortures you for most of the day. You're not tortured by your mind, and the approach of sleep feels delicious. And you are not thinking. I wish I could stay here is the last thought that you have. And then you go off. And then you wake up in the morning and your eyes open. And for a few seconds, you go 10 seconds maybe, 20. And then the machinery of the mind starts creaking. What time is it? What's my first appointment today? Oh, no, I have to deal with that. Oh, God. And then I have to meet that obnoxious person at 11. And there you are, gone. There was a moment of presence. And perhaps in that moment, when you woke up, you had risen above thought. When you went to sleep, you were falling below thought. When you woke up, perhaps for 10 seconds, you were on a level above thought. And that is a level where you look at the world with that bright eyes and pure, innocent perception. And everything is alive. You can sense the aliveness in everything. And the world is good at this moment. And you have no problems. And then that's present moment. Awareness is present moment awareness. It's always implied. When we use the term awareness, present moment is implied because you can only be aware in the present moment. Awareness is presence. And then you lose the present moment. You lose awareness because your consciousnness is being absorbed by thinking. It sucks up all your consciousness like some parasitical parasite, psychic parasite living inside you that sucks up all. I need more, I need to think more. And then you have this monstrous thing in your head, and you think it's you. And it talks all the time. Not necessarily out aloud, it talks in here. And you can have discussions in here too. And you're identified with it. The unconscious state, lack of awareness, complete absence. You are not there. So the revolutionary, incredible thing that is the essence of the new consciousness that arises, a new evolutionary stage for humanity, which either is already, we are on the way towards it, even if, just to come back to what I said earlier, I might have lost the thread, even if we have to go through another episode of intense self-created suffering on a huge scale, which is not impossible. Even if humanity has to go through that, the awakening consciousness is not lost. It will then, when humanity regenerates, it will quickly arise again, the same consciousness that's arising in you now, and bring about the collective awakening, which are we going to experience another dark age? Maybe, but what's 1,000 years? Not much. Even 2,000 years, not that much. So I'm very optimistic. Consciousness will prevail because consciousness is the purpose of the universe. The universe there's an impulse, an evolutionary impulse towards consciousness in the universe. So all is well. And now it's up to you. Now we come to what really matters. To change the world. We've already seen it cannot be done unless there is that shift in consciousness in the individual human. And that begins with you, and it takes place every moment of your life. And you use every opportunity and whatever arises in your life as part of that. And sometimes you forget, that's fine. Sometimes you get taken over again by the mind completely. The ego arises again, that's fine. And then you wake up again. So for many of you, it's you wake up and you fall to sleep periodically. It's the new, you're present, and then the old, you're absent. And then you wake up again. And that's fine. That's part of for most people, that is part of the awakening process. And gradually, the periods of time when you're awake, present, lengthens. You're awake for longer than before. And the ability of challenges and other unconscious humans to pull you into unconsciousness decreases. Reality itself, as you perceive it, goes through the filter of your mental emotional conditioning from the past. The non-conceptual dimension of consciousness, as we could call it, is already emerging in most of you. And that is about the most important thing that could happen in a person's life, which is the emergence of a deeper dimension of consciousness. I would say that this is what Jesus referred to when he was talking to Mary in the parable of Mary and Martha. And just to quote one brief sentence of just a few words, he said to Martha, "Only one thing is needed. Only one thing is needed." My translation of that is, there's only one thing in life that is of absolute importance. And everything else may also be important, but it is of relative importance. So all the things that happen in your life and in the world may all be important, some more important than others. Your entire life situation, everybody has one, and everybody's life situation is somewhat, if not very, problematic. You're not the only one. So there's that. There is all the things that happen, your financial situation, your health situation, your relationship situation, your work situation, your living situation. Yes, these things matter, relatively speaking, but there's one thing that is more important, that matters absolutely, and that is your state of consciousness. And whether or not you have awakened to what we could call, it sounds a little abstract, but it's not, we could call the transcendent dimension of consciousness in you. The transcendent dimension of consciousness. Now, I'm not going to immediately define what that means, because actually it cannot be defined. It can be pointed to, this is what these words are for, but these words are not a substitute for it. The words point. Famous phrase in Buddhism, it's the finger pointing to the moon. But the finger is not the moon. So there's nothing that I say tonight that you need to believe on a conceptual level. I'm not asking you to believe anything whatsoever. There is what I sometimes call the two levels of consciousness, the conceptual. I sometimes call that object consciousness. These are all the things that happen in your perceptual field and in your mental field, thinking, emotions, sense perceptions. Things arise, things pass away, things come and go, sense perceptions, ideas, thoughts, opinions, feelings, emotions, all belong to object consciousness. One object after another happens. You perceive things, there, and then thought objects arise continuously, a stream of thoughts. No, for most people, the stream of thoughts has such a gravitational pull that they get completely dragged along by this continuously proliferating stream of mental activity. I sometimes call it the voice in the head. It never stops speaking. It continuously comments on where you are, what you're doing, or takes you somewhere completely different in the so-called past or the so-called future. One thing after another, one damn thing after another, to paraphrase Churchill. Churchill was talking about history. History is just one damn thing after another, and that's true. But for many people, their conditioned mind, the experience of their conditioned mind is just one damn thing after another, because it never leaves you alone. It goes. So most humans who are not awakened or even awakening are completely trapped in their object consciousness. They are confined by it, and not only that, they are completely identified with all the arising thoughts and emotions that continuously go through their mind. And there's no separation between the thoughts and the emotions that accompany the thoughts, and you're not even there. When you're totally identified with the voice in the head, you are, spiritually speaking, asleep. Or another word for it is unconscious. So an unconscious person, in ordinary usage, unconscious means, of course, you've completely lost, you don't know what's going on, and this is unconscious. In conventional usage, unconscious means, in spiritual usage, unconscious means completely and continuously identified with the stream of thinking and the emotions that go with the stream of thinking. What does it mean to be identified? It means you derive your sense of who you are from the stream of thinking. Every thought is imbued with a sense of self. So you're identified. It has you in its grasp. And therefore, if you say, people conventionally say, I think, what do you think? As if thinking for most people were a voluntary activity, whereas for most, not you, but those who are not awakening yet, which is the majority of the population still on the planet, for most, that is, they are completely identified with the stream of thinking. They are, spiritually speaking, unconscious. And that is a terrible thing, because then everything that you perceive, reality itself as you perceive it, goes through the filter of your mental emotional conditioning from the past. So you never see anything as it is, perceive anything clearly, and most importantly, there is never a sense of true inner peace, spaciousness, joy, sense of aliveness, sense of connectedness with something that is deeper than your historical person. You're always at the mercy of what goes on out there and the reactive patterns of your mind. So you're completely unaware of the possibility of realizing the other dimension of consciousness, which is not object consciousness, but space consciousness. I call it sometimes space consciousness. Now, what is space consciousness? You cannot define it because it's beyond concepts. You can know what space consciousness is in this very moment by becoming aware of the gaps between words when I speak. I'm just slowing down a little bit. So instead of being totally interested in the words, you're also interested, although that's probably not the right word, you're also giving attention to the empty spaces between the words, because they are needed. Without the spaces, there could be no sounds. The sound needs the space to exist. Oh, that's interesting. To be aware of the gaps between words. Or, in this room, in this hall, to be aware not only of the objects in this room, the objects that make up this room, what's in it, the bodies, the objects, that which confines and defines the room, the ceiling, the walls, the floor, this is the room. You're not only aware of that, that would be, in this analogy, object consciousness, you're also aware of the space in this room. Now, the space isn't something that you say, oh, it's there, or it's there. But it is the most important part of this room is the space. And it's a wonderful space, but you cannot define it. It has no actual, you can't even say that space exists, because exist means to manifest, to stand out. Exist, ex means out from Latin. Exist means to be manifested. But space doesn't manifest, it enables everything to manifest in the physical realm. Without space, these things could not be here. So space is prior to existence. Space is prior to manifestation. And that's very interesting. So there is something in you, which I sometimes call space consciousness, that is prior to who you are as a person, your personality. And you can know it not conceptually, but immediately and experientially by becoming aware either of the spaciousness outside of you or becoming aware of spaces between sounds, spaces between words. Now, how do you do that? How do you become aware of a space between two words? There is no how, because it's too simple for how. Quite simply, there's an attention in you, a field of alert attention, and this field of alert attention is aware of the space between words. You notice that silent space. What does it mean to notice that silent space? It means in this brief moment of noticing, or noticing the space in this room, in this brief moment, you're not thinking, you're just aware. Thinking, you cannot be aware of those spaces between words, because thinking is object consciousness. The space between words takes you to space consciousness. So the entire secret of our gathering here, of all spirituality, is just one thing. Now, amazingly, I'm going to talk about this one thing for hours.